The war. The war after the war. The war for freedom of religion after the Revolutionary War. That's what we're talking about. The war of freedom of speech. The war of the First and Second Amendments. The Baptists wanted to make sure that they had freedom of religion. On page 279 or 275 on the Baptist history of the Baptist Church, the state church was something that the world understood. By 325 AD on downward, the world didn't understand anything of freedom of religion or anything other than the state church. The church and the state were one. Baptists never had anything to do with that. They were not Protestants, they were before Protestants. They protested the Catholic Church, but they were before the Catholic Church. There was freedom of religion before the Catholic Church and freedom of religion after the Catholic Church. Here, in 325 AD is when the Catholic Church was founded. But there was always Novatians and Puritans and Cathari and Patarenes. There was always Anabaptists, rebaptizers. They were called everything. They were called anti-Christians because they wouldn't accept the baptism of anyone else. God gave them the authority to baptize, they said, and they weren't not going to accept anybody else's baptism. Jefferson was a statesman of the Revolutionary War. Washington the general and Franklin the sage. Benjamin Franklin was a former white slave, by the way. He was a former white slave that ran away. He ran away. Andrew Johnson was a white slave that ran away. There was a bounty on him for many years. By the way, Andrew Johnson never went to one day of school in his life. Talked about Lincoln and all of his wonderful things that he did and self-educated and all. Andrew Johnson's wife educated him, taught him how to read and write, and he became a statesman. The attitude of Jefferson toward liberty and establishment brought upon him much obloquy. He was thoroughly hated by that class, especially the New England clergy. They called him an infidel and an atheist. As a matter of fact, he was an Episcopalian with Unitarian tendencies. That's what he actually was. He was raised as a Episcopalian, but he had Unitarian sympathies. He was a deist. On the other hand, the Baptists loved and supported him. His views on liberty so closely united with theirs that they were his devoted friends and supporters. When he was elected president, the Church of Cheshire, Massachusetts, made a cheese, which weighed 1,450 pounds, and sent it to Washington to Jefferson. A 1,450-pound block of cheese. Now, cheese was like gold in these days, you know. In 1801, by the celebrated John Leland, their pastor, as an expression of warm regard, and they entertained for their great leader in the battle of freedom, the battle of the freedom for all religions. John Leland was a man of singular ability, independence, frankness, humor, and piety. He wrote for the Baptists to the state papers. Jefferson associated with the Baptists. They admired him and he admired them. A few of his statements in regard to them are here recorded. A letter addressed to Levi Lincoln, the Attorney General, January the 1st, 1802. The Baptist address now enclosed admits a condemnation of the alliance between church and state. Under the authority of the Constitution, it furnishes an occasion too, which I have long wished for, to find out, saying why I do not proclaim fasting and thanksgiving as my predecessors did. The address, to be sure, does not point at this time, and to the introduction is awkward. but I foresee no opportunity of doing it more patently. I know it will give great defense to the New England clergy, but the advocate of religious freedom is to expect neither peace nor forgiveness from them. You can't have religious liberty with them at all. He addressed the members of the Baltimore Baptist Association October the 7th, 1808. I reserve with great pleasure the friendly address of the Baltimore Baptist Association and am sensible how much I am indebted to the kind dispositions which dictated it. In our early struggle for religious liberty and freedom could not fail to become a primary object. All men felt the right and just animation, befriended its establishment, and am entitled, but in common with others, to a portion of that approbation which follows the fulfillment of duty. Excited by wrongs, to reject foreign government with directed our concerns according to our own interests and not ours, the principles which justified us were obvious to all understandings. They were imprinted in the breast of every human being, and Providence ever pleased to direct the issue of our contest in favor of that side where justice was since the happy separation of our nation has lightly avoided entanglement itself with the systems of European interest, the church and state, and has taken no side between the rival powers attached to it. To none of its ever-changing confederations the peace is desirable, and you do me justice in saying that to preserve and to secure this has been the constant aim of my administration. The difficulties which involve it, however, are now at their ultimate term, and what will be their issue, time alone will disclose. But it be what it may, a recollection of our former vassalage in religion, and slavery in religion, is what he talked about, and civil government, will unite the zeal of every heart and the energy of every hand to reserve that independence in both which, under the favor of heaven and a disinterested devotion to the public cause, first achieved, and this disinterested sacrifice of private interest will now maintain. I am happy in your approbation of my reasons for determining to retire from a station in which the favor of my fellow citizens have so long continued and supported me. I return your kind prayers and supplications to the same Almighty Being for your future welfare and that of our beloved country, Thomas Jefferson. He addressed the members of the Ketoken Baptist Association on October the 18th, 1808, as follows. Now, Thomas Jefferson and Baptists were good friends. They were soulmates in religious liberty. The views you express of the conduct of the belligerent persons or powers, that is, are correct, as they are afflicting to the lovers of justice and humanity. These moral principles of conventional uses, which have heretofore been the band or the bond of civilized nations, which now have so often preserved their peace by furnishing common rules for the measure of their rights, have now given way to force. The law of the barbarians of the 19th century dawns with the vandalism of the 5th. Nothing has been spared on our part to preserve the peace of our country during this distempered state of the world that we live in. The following letter was written To the general meeting, the correspondence of the 6th Baptist Association represented at Chesterfield, Virginia, November the 21st, 1808. Thomas Jefferson Baptists were like this. They might have not theologically agreed in the person of God or anything else, but they believed in religious liberty. Thank you, fellow citizens, for your affectionate address. I receive with satisfaction your approbation of my motives for retirement. In reviewing the history of the times through which we have passed, no portion of it gives greater satisfaction or reflection than that which presents the efforts of the friends of religious freedom and the success with which they were crowned. We have solved by fair experiment the great and interesting question whether freedom of religion is compatible with order of government and obedience in laws. And we have experienced the quiet as well as the comfort with results from leaving every one to profess freely and openly their principles of religion, which are the inductions of his own reason and the serious convictions of his own inquiries. It is a source of great contentment to me to learn that the measures which have been pursued in the administration of your affairs have met with your approbation. Too often we have had but a choice among difficulties, and the situation characterizes remarkably the present moment. But fellow citizens, if we are faithful to our country, if we are acquiescent with our goodwill and the decisions of the majority, and the nation moves en masse in the same direction, although it may not be that which every individual thinks best, we have nothing to fear from any quarter. I thank you sincerely for your kind wishes for my welfare, and with equal sincerity implore the favor of a protecting providence for yourselves. Thomas Jefferson. In his return from Washington, he received a letter of congratulations from the Baptist Church in Buck Mountain, Canal County, April 13, 1808. On his return from Washington, he said, "Your approbation of my conduct is the more valued as you may have best known me, and is an ample reward for your services that I may have rendered. I have acted together from the origin of the end of a memorial revolution, and have contributed, each in line of allotted us, our endeavors to render its issue permanent, a permanent blessing to our country. The persecutions and victories brought about at every desirable union between regular and separate Baptists. In the origin, and frequently in methods, they were diverse, while in doctrines there were variations, yet in some points substantially agreement. It was felt that the union of the two parties was desirable, the union of the separate and regular Baptists. The actual union was a slow accomplishment. The first public movement was inaugurated in 1767. We're going back down the road now. We went up to 1800. Now we're going to talk about the difference in Baptist churches. But it received no defining form. 3 years later at Catoctin, a regular or Calvinistic association in Northern Virginia addressed to Sandy Creek, a separate Armenian association in Southern Virginia, and mostly in Northern Carolina on the subject, and they said of their letter, "Beloved in our Lord Jesus Christ, the bearers of this letter will acquaint you with the design of writing it. Their errand is peace, and their business is reconciliation. If there is any difference subsisting, if we are all Christians, all Baptists, all New Lights, why are we divided? And must the little appellates the regular and separate break the golden band of charity, and set the sons and daughters of God at variance. Behold, how good and how pleasant for brethren to dwell together in unity. But how bad and how bitter it is for them to live asunder in discord, to indulge ourselves in prejudice and surely disorder, and to quarrel about nothing is irregular with a witness. Oh, dear brethren, let us endeavor for the future to avoid this calamity. The members were cordially received. The address was read, the subject entertained and mutually considered. It was allowed that some details remained to be adjusted. The Sandy Creek Association, which they embraced, our District of Virginia and North Carolina, and Western and South Carolina were soon divided into other associations, and the project failed. The Cahokia, associated in 1772, occupied a part of South Carolina and all the regions of Virginia south of the James River. To this body, the General Association, which was composed of both parties, addressed themselves and sent Samuel Harris and Elijah Craig and John Waller and David Thompson to treat with them, to confer with them. At the meeting of General Association, there was much excitement. And there were two meetings, but in contagious places. The regulars asked for the assent of the separates on two propositions: that salvation is of the special electing grace of God, and that salvation is without merit on the part of the creature. The separates, in other consultation, sent the following reply: Dear brethren, a study of union with you makes us willing to be more explicit in our answer to your terms of reconciliation proposed. We do not deny the former part of your proposition, respecting particular election of grace, still retaining our liberty and with regard to construction. And as to the later part, respecting merit in the creature, we are free to profess that there is none. Now right there is where we're going to quit for this message. We talked about the war of the church-state brethren and the freedom of religion brethren. The Baptists instilled the First and Second Commandments to the Constitution of the United States. They demanded that it be there.
Yeah.
It worked. You have freedom of religion and freedom to bear arms today because of these people. They fought hard for it. The established church, the Church of England, the Catholic Church, even the Methodists fought. The Presbyterians fought against the Baptists because they wanted a state that supported the ministry. And the Baptists said, God will convict his members of his churches to support the ministry. You don't have to force it into law. And now we're talking about the Baptists and their ideas, their separate ideas, the freedom of religion, all of them agreed on. The separation of the church and state, all of them agreed on. But the particular views of Baptist thought and theology were being discussed. And that's what we'll discuss in the next few messages also. Our Father, we send this message out for your honor and glory. You said that your church would be here until you come back for it, and I believe that. And whether I believe it or not, it's going to happen. And how soon you come back for your children, we do not know. But we look forward to you always. Father, please forgive us where we fail you. Use your word for your honor and glory. In Jesus'